Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video on my 1978 Volkswagen Bus restoration. And in this one, we're going to be doing something a little bit unique and customized here. We're going to create blank out windows, which are opaque windows that go in the side areas made of aluminum plate instead of glass. I got this idea from a channel called Flossy Missiles, who has a Westfalia or camping van again, and he did this window here because in the camping vans there's like a cabinet in front of it, so it's pointless to really have clear glass. But I got the idea to do it and basically do it to all my windows to create a unique and cool panel van. So stay tuned to see how I did it. All right, so the windows that we're planning on blacking out are all of the side windows here, all these wide side windows. The rear tailgate will have the original glass put back in it that has the rear defroster lines in it. And then of course I will be installing the front windshield. But all the rest of the windows I want to blank out with aluminum panels. So where I got the materials is I went to Midwest Steel and Aluminum, which was midweststeelsupply.com. And I searched for 6061 aluminum sheet, and I selected the thickness of 0.19, 16-inch width by 44-inch length, and I ordered 4 of them, or one for each of the window size cutouts. It doesn't cost much more to have this stuff pre-cut, and it saves you ultimately on the shipping size. Now, when I did 0.19, I put my caliper on the actual glass window and it was about 0.17. So 0.19 is a little bit thicker than that. You may be able to get away with going to 0.16, which would be a little bit thinner and maybe a little lighter. In terms of weight, when I used the 0.19 and once I had a finished piece, I compared it to the glass piece, it was about 2 to 2.5 pounds heavier. But when compared to the Jalusi windows, it was about the same exact weight. I showed you the material and where to buy it. Now let me show you the tools and how we're going to cut it. I was originally going to buy a Diablo blade, but I happen to have a coupon at Menards, and Menards had this brand. I've never heard of it. It says made in Italy. It's called CMT Orange Tools, and this is a non-ferrous and laminate type cutting blade for a 7¼ saw. Non-ferrous and laminate, meaning it can cut harder materials. It's got more teeth. This one's a 60 tooth. When they say aluminum, a lot of times they're referring to extrusions and things like that, but it can cut, all kinds of soft metals that aren't steel and with no problem. So I'm hoping that this will go fine by cutting through our aluminum plate here. All right, well, I'm finishing cutting my last panel here, and just to give a little recap here of how I cut them. Again, the DeWalt saw set up with that aluminum cut blade, and you might think, well, with that circular saw you're not going to be able to do much for rounding the edge, but actually you can, because if you're standing on this side of the circular saw, you can just run it, back it up, run it, back it up, run it, back it up, run it, and you can kind of chew around. And I was able to get pretty much the shape that I needed with the saw and not have to deal with doing all of that on the flapper disc. Well, then the next step after I cut it was to use a flapper disc. I bought a bunch of these cheap ones from Harbor Freight, these Warrior ones. The reason I didn't want to spend a lot of money on them is because aluminum does not sand very well, and it tends to just clog up your sandpaper. So just buy cheap ones because it's soft. You don't need expensive ones, and you're just going to gum them up and have to throw them away. But pretty much I just used the grinder and the flap disc, and I guess these are probably, this is 36 grit. And basically I just used that to round the edges and, just deal with any issues in the cut, any jagged edges in the cut. But that pretty much worked on that, both sides, all the way around, just kind of rounding my edges with it and smoothing out any issues in the cut. And by the way, for safety, that saw cutting aluminum, as you can probably imagine, is the loudest thing ever, right? So make sure you have hearing protection, eye protection. I even put my welding sleeves and my gloves on because it makes a mess. Aluminum is not like steel, it cuts like wood. It makes like dust. I mean, yeah, so that stuff, that hot dust will be flying all over the place. So make sure you have plenty of PPE on. So after the cutting and the grinding of the edge, then I'll take my 80 grit on my orbital and I'll just go over it a bunch, the edges again, and go over both top and bottom all around, and just make sure the edges are real smooth and we've got etched fine scratches all in the aluminum. Any deeper scratches in the aluminum are buffed out with the sanding, and basically we're doing 80 grit to prep it for the primer coat. Now, in terms of how I got my shape, obviously I took one of the pieces of glass that I had, this one being one of the rear windows, placed it on top of the aluminum, took a fine tip Sharpie and just drew it out. So that's how I did the rear windows. The front side windows, those were all, because it was a camper, both of mine were these Jalousie windows where the aluminum frame was actually was holding onto the window. And because that aluminum frame is kind of in the middle, it made it very hard to trace. So what I ended up having to do is put a straight edge on it and kind of trace it all around on a piece of cardboard and made myself a template. And then I used that template to then transfer the line onto my aluminum panel. Now I have a couple set up here that are pretty much ready to go. They're sanded, and I've also fit them with the seal. Now I just did that for both of my shapes, right? For my rear and for my front side windows, just to make sure that my gaskets worked. With this car, I ended up getting a lot of rubber just as part of the project car, when I bought it from the previous owner. So it was a blessing and a curse because I got a bunch of stuff and I didn't have to buy it, but also this stuff has been floating around for about 5 to 8 years. So I didn't have labels for a lot of this stuff. It was hard to decipher what went with what. But now that I'm kind of toward the end of the restoration, I've whittled it down and I sort of know what's left. And I end up getting a bunch of extra seals, which is nice. So you can see there's 6 total here. And I believe they're the same seal, unless I guessed perfectly, but I just picked randomly that seal, and they both seem to fit around each of those shapes. So I think that's all the same part number there. But yeah, I've got 6 of them and I only need 4. So thought I'd try them out first just to make sure it's all gonna work, and I think it's gonna be great. And then there's my other panel there, all ready to go. So the next thing I need to do is prime and paint them. So I am going to remove the rubber from those panels and we'll get set up in here. Once I finish the sanding in this, I got to clean it all out and then we're going to set up for paint. Okay, well, our panels are all done and I got the seals wrapped around them. I did epoxy primer and let that cure. I actually let it cure for about 72 hours on the aluminum, and as long as the aluminum's prepped well, it stuck really nice to it. And then went over that with a couple coats of the Tamco single stage paint. And because I've never been able to paint that with that Tamco single stage without a lot of orange peel, I also went ahead on each side and did the color sanding and buffing. It's basically just wet sanding and buffing to correct the paint. I did a video on this, so I'll link it over my head. I did basically the same steps as I did before. It's not going to be a show quality finish, it's just kind of the bare minimum, but it works for me. So they still have a fair amount of orange peel, but they're nice and shiny now, and they look pretty good, pretty smooth on each side. And of course they match the car. I've got the seals on. I made sure the outside of the seals where I want it, because obviously that's going to be the rear of the window, so just make sure you're looking at that. I did one wrong and had to take it off, so that always ends up happening. My wife and I did the glass already, so we've got the rear glass installed, and we also have the front windshield done as well. So those are really probably the hardest of this one's probably the hardest of all the windows. So I'm gonna grab my older son and we're going to install these, and I'm not gonna do really a tutorial on how to install them. There's probably a million on YouTube. But my technique is, just like everybody else, I wrap a cord in all around the channel in there, overlap it around the top, I start at the top, and then when the outside person is pushing in, you know, I kind of work it out. And I also use this tool to help get me started sometimes, just get that up into the seam and pick it out and you know, carefully work it around. I use this silicone wire. It's really floppy wire, and the two criteria I have for a pull cord is that it has to be tough, because when you pull on it, the last thing you want is for it to snap. And but you also want it to be soft so that it doesn't pull or split your rubber. And then also, you know, generous amounts of silicone lubricant. This is a silicone coated wire. I'll put a link in the description. And I just keep reusing this over and over. So it's cut a little extra long for the windshield, but I'll use it on all these windows. But yeah, it does a good job. And I also use a circular movement. Kind of as I'm pulling, I kind of do a circular movement, and that kind of rolls it to keep it from getting stuck and cutting the seal. So that's the technique. What's going to be more difficult about these is they're opaque. And so me being the inside person and my outside person just kind of being the, you know, being the person that gets barked commands at, like, you know, more pressure up here, more pressure here, more, you know, let off pressure here, whatever. It's going to be a lot of, you know, no, your left, no, your left, 2 inches from the, you know, corner or whatever. So without it being clear and being able to point to it, this is going to make it a little more difficult, but these are the side windows and they usually go in a lot easier. So I will try to get a clip of it if I can, but if not, I will bring you back in when they're installed. All right, well, I've got the car outside because I'm basically starting on the wheels, which will be my next video here. As you can see, I've got both of the rear windows installed, but not these center windows here. And the reason for that is because I need to do a little bit of work on them. So when my son and I did the windows, we only actually got this one in the first try. This one and the rest were way too tight, and we couldn't even get it to where they were close to fitting in there. On this one, I just taped off about 1/16 of an inch all the way around and re-ground it down and kind of rounded it out, and then cleaned it up, put the seal back on, and then this went in just fine. And after I got, you know, it cut right, it was like a 5-minute job to actually install it. These are even worse. And now I'm realizing what I did wrong, and let me show you that so you don't make the same mistake. So basically, I modeled this after the Jalousie window frame. But the Jalousie window frame has not only a smaller lip, but also a smaller low profile seal to have it go in there. So cutting this out to the same size is actually too big, way too big. What I'm going to do here is, I think similar to this, but I may actually just use the saw just to save my time and flap discs. I'll probably tape off a little bit more, maybe either a 1/16 or maybe 3/32 of an inch. I'll tape it off all the way around, put some cardboard over it to protect the paint, and I'll go back over the straight edges again and just finish rounding off the edges with the flap discs. But that's going to be required in order for it to fit in here, because with this thicker seal and with this thicker material, you need to reduce the size a little bit. Even on the glass windows, just a 1/16 of an inch helped out to make sure that that seal and everything could fit in, and it was still even tight. So make sure you cut your windows, if you're doing it off glass and you're doing the 0.019 aluminum, make sure you come about a 1/16 of an inch smaller. But these Jalousie windows, probably a little bit more, maybe 3/32 of an inch smaller. We'll see. Maybe I even need to go to 1/8 of an inch. But I'll bring you back in when I get those done. I'll let you know what I did. Okay, well, I got one of the side windows actually cut and fit finally. This took me last night a few hours and 4 tries of putting the seal on, trying to fit it in, taking it out, taking the seal off, re-cutting or grinding it, putting the seal back on, and so on and so forth. Now I still have to do this side, and that's my last one. I don't think it'll take me near that long now that I've learned what I did on the other side. So because I was confident on the 4th try on the other window that I was able to install, before I put the seal on, I placed it over this window here and I used a pencil and traced out the shape. That way I can save myself a lot of time on this final piece by just simply cutting it out to what I know works. So just to give you an idea on the sizing here is, if you can see my pencil line, in some cases it's up to 1/4 of an inch that has to come off. And then certain areas around there and, you know, around here, maybe 1/8 of an inch on the sides. So this should go a lot quicker. I'm going to go ahead and tape these lines off and cut them as close as I can with the saw, and then regrind it and shape the edges back out. And then I should be able to get this on the first try. All right, well, I finally got the other middle panel on and it's looking real good. I got it outside and did some car wash on it and everything's sealed in. I'm now can just leave it outside and don't have to worry about rain getting in it. We have a roof, we have all of our windows, we even have all of our door gaskets in, all the gaskets for the sliding door. I even got this little bead for the, what do you call this, the sliding door cover. I got all the gaskets in for the rear hatch, engine lid. Of course, we did the roof on the last video, and everything's looking pretty good. I even sealed in the antenna hole. I was going to put an aftermarket antenna in, and like a lot of aftermarket parts, it was utter garbage. So I decided, well, I don't need an antenna, but I took the seal, I modified a little aluminum plate piece and with a screw, and that screw is threaded into a thing in the back and it's holding it in, and then I put sealant all around it. So it's held in, and it's rained on this car pretty hard. I had it outside and it seems to seal in really well. Of course, it's got the windshield wipers are in. They're not right yet. I got to get new blades because these don't hold in. But there it is. On the next video, we'll try to finish up the wheels and wrap up the exterior restoration. So I'm excited to bring that to an end, and it's looking really good right now. So I'll see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.